Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Joining us right now from LA is David Mamet. Most of you are familiar with Mr. Mamet's career as a playwright, screenwriter, novelist, and director. He's won a Pulitzer Prize for the play Glengarry Glen Ross. He has also been nominated for Academy Awards for writing The Untouchables, The Verdict, and Wag the Dog. Right now we're going to talk to him about his new collection of novellas, 3 war stories. David, it's a pleasure to have you back on Newsmax TV.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
All right, so in all the stories, I was really impressed with the way you seem to balance the romantic aspects of war and the truly brutal aspects as well. Does that come naturally for you, or was it a struggle, particularly in this book?
That's a very good question. You know, there's somebody said recently that a lot of the stuff that people of my generation read about men especially is kind of war pornography. It's for the people like myself who never served in the military and kind of have are trying to suss out through reading what it might have been. So I'm trying to do the same thing through writing. So that's why I started writing these war stories.
Yeah, anyone familiar with your career knows you have this unique way of writing dialogue. You're master of this art, and it's a very unique style. But what is your process for writing the vivid dialogue, specifically in The Handle and the Hold, which is a story about 2 ex-military men who steal a plane just before the Israeli War for Independence?
Yeah, I really love that story. I don't think anyone's written much about the Israeli War of Independence. It was a very important conflict, especially to me being an American and a Jew, and a lot of the people of my dad's generation who were veterans of World War II were also active American Jews, both legally and illegally, in pre-statehood and in the War of Independence, and I was privileged to know many of them. So this, The Handle and the Hold, is kind of an homage to them and the way they talked. Something that really impressed me about the World War II generation, my dad's generation, was that they never spoke about the war. They never spoke about it. And it wasn't that they were repressing anything, it just wasn't done. Whether that was good or bad, I don't know, but that was the case. So, but many of them did speak about their participation in the Irgun or in the Palmach in pre-statehood Israel and in the Israeli War of Independence. So I wanted to capture that. A lot of those guys are still around.
Yeah, I mean, is that how you based your dialogue on conversations you had with people who were there at the time? I mean, it comes off as so credible. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it really does take you to that particular moment in history.
Thanks. Well, you know, the way that those guys talk in that book, these 30-year-old Jews in 1948, those were the people who, that was my dad's generation. That's the way all those guys talked. And the whole idea of weak Jews or of passive Jews was completely foreign to, I guess I'm getting out for 66, to people of my generation, because we didn't know any weak Jews, because the weak Jews were all dead. The people who survived, as my father did and his generation did, immigration and the Depression and World War II, were tough as nails. And like a lot of people who were tough as nails, they spoke in code and they spoke beautifully and elusively, and they got a big kick out of speaking the English language. So I grew up with that kind of dialogue.
Now, back to kind of what I talked about in the first question here, did you have a target audience for this work? Were you trying to maybe give more reality to war for the folks who enjoy this quote-unquote war pornography? And did you ever think about ex-military members reading this, and was that difficult for you trying to come off as credible?
Well, I hope that the book is not, I hope that the 3 novels, the 3 novellas are not war pornography. I hope that they're, to a certain extent, they're fantasy. And a lot of the stuff written about war, before Tom Clancy, rest in peace, really invented a lot of his books, which are beautifully written, are gossip about machines. But before he invented the techno thriller, war stories were something else altogether. In the World War II generation, if you look at James Jones and if you look at Norman Mailer, and also to a certain extent at James Salter and Irwin Shaw and Leon Uris, and a lot of them, with the exception of Leon Uris and Irwin Shaw, it's hard to pick out the story. They're not a story about war because apparently one can't write about war. I don't think so. So if you look at Naked and the Dead, which is a huge success, for example, it's kind of a crypto homosexual courtship, which is nothing wrong with that, except it's not really a war story. And so what's the greatest war story is really a fantasy, which is Catch-22, which is an attempt of a great artist, Joseph Heller in that case, to talk about something which can't be addressed straight on.
Yeah, I mean, most people read something from Leon Uris, whether it's Exodus or Trinity when they're in school. Hopefully they also read Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. And I may be so bold as to put these books in that same kind of category that just really takes you to the time and to the place. And you can almost kind of smell some of these environments that these characters in. What inspired you to write these particular stories, these three stories about these very different times in history at this particular time, this modern moment?
Well, thanks. I'm a dramatist, which means I spend my life crafting these incredibly intricate and rather difficult to write poems, which are very, very demanding, because you can't put in an extra syllable in a drama. You just can't. And if you don't take out that extra syllable, you aren't doing your job. On the other hand, if you write a novel, or you write a fantasy, you write a novella, you're free to expatiate and go here and there wherever the spirit moves, which is what I've done in these three war stories. It's such a kick. The last one's about the Israeli War of Independence, and the first one is kind of a fantasy. It's a sea novel that is based on a captain during the Napoleonic Wars. So not only do I get to go hither and thither, at one point he's a spy, at one point he's a novelist, at one point he's a sea captain, but I also get to play around with recreating the Georgian language, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it was challenging as a reader, but well worth that challenge. Another theme with all your works is the characters. Just like in these three stories, they're all in very much different circumstances than any of the readers who are going to pick up the book, but they're all very identifiable. You've created so many great characters and so many great lines, and one of the most recognizable that comes to my mind is Alec Baldwin's motivational speech in the film version of Glengarry Glen Ross. Did you have any idea at the time that those words would be actually used by some sales managers to motivate their sales force? And if you ever did meet a sales manager who quoted some of the lines from that movie, what would you say to him?
No, I never did. I was friendly years ago with John Cleese. I hope I'm still friendly with him. I just haven't seen him lately. And he told me that all of the Fawlty Towers episodes, there were 17 of them, were so beloved by hotel people and hospitality people that John formed this company to take the lessons in Fawlty Towers, which is a show about a failed bed and breakfast, and use them to teach people how to run a hotel. So I thought that was pretty great. I suppose I should have done the same thing about Glengarry Glen Ross. But you never know what's going to be successful. One just doesn't know. I mean, one writes things and says, "Oh my God, they're going to make me Yertle the Turtle for this," and nobody comes. And on the other hand, you do stuff which you thought, well, this ain't bad, and people are talking about it 40 years later. Thank God.
Now, out of all the great characters that you've created in your works, who would you most like to have a drink or grab a bite to eat with?
Well, the problem of any dramatist, especially one who's been doing it for a long, long time, is you want to get these guys out of your head. You just want them to stop talking to you. So that's one reason one writes, so you don't have to have dinner with them anymore.
Well, I think it's fair to say that your works do more than amuse. They sometimes can amaze, and I think these three novellas are certainly examples of works that do just that. David Mamet, the new collection of novellas is titled 3 War Stories. You can check it out on Amazon.com. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And also, say hi to Mitch and Murray for me today if you can see him.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, and thanks for joining us here on Newsmax TV.